So let's get started. I'm going to present on the OPC Foundation certification program. Maybe a little history of it should start. Um, as Stefan had mentioned earlier in one of the keynote presentations, certification has been around a long time for the foundation. We created the program in 2007, first products in 2008. Certification for OPC Foundation is always based on profiles, facets, and conformance units. That's what we test. That's what we do. The profiles and facets are available on the Foundation's website via the profile tool. And mind you, this tool also contains all of the test cases. So you can actually see the test cases, see what's being tested. So it has all the details available through that tool. What does the foundation test when we certify a product? We test clients, servers, publishers, subscribers. We test information models. This includes companion spec models can be tested. We make sure that the products also are interoperable. So we test them against other vendor products. Sometimes this gives a good way of testing some unique things like the fact that some servers may have just GUID node IDs. We check and validate that clients can handle GUIDs or opaque strings for node IDs. So we validate that the whole range of products are available. We also test that your server and clients or your applications are robust. They can handle error handling, including bad networks and sort of standard problems you may see. We also test efficiency. So we have a long-running stress environment that your product is subject to. We make sure that it can run for a period of time in a environment that's not necessarily great. Networks break and other connection issues. And then lastly, of course, we just do a quick review that you have some level of documentation and that a end user that buys your application gets a nice feeling about the product. We have automated testing tools, and this will come into play a little bit more. We'll show you when we get to the FX pieces. But the automated test tool checks all the services that you have. It can validate the address space of the server. It has security validation. It has over 1,800 test scripts in it. So it's a generally very useful set of tools for testing. Oh, and by the way, it's publicly available, so you can download it from the Foundation's website. Members get it for free. Non-members can purchase it, non-corporate members, I should say. But it's available for everyone. So let's get into what the presentation really needs to be about, which is that we're talking about FX testing and certification. So FLC requires testing of all UAFX products. As Stefan said, I think in one of the keynotes, that the use of OPC UAFX or UAFX is a protected identity. You cannot list these as being part of your product unless you've had your product tested. So that's an important thing. What do we test? We test information models. We test connection and communication pieces. And we also test offline engineering. This is something new that I'll spend a little bit more time on each of these. So for information models, what's released in the controller is an automation component, functional entities, and assets. These are all base information model pieces for FX. They all get tested, right? So we handle testing for those. We have testing for connection managers. This is a piece of software that is used to help set up communications between the various automation components in a dynamic manner. The controller is required to have a connection manager, so the controller profile requires you to have one filled in. In the future, we'll probably have a connection manager profile that's a standalone one in case you want a standalone one. Testing would still be the same. We test all the communications pieces, so logical connections and the pub-sub based communications. So this includes bidirectional communications so that you can have to an input and an output from both endpoints, and they work together to form the logical connection. Sometimes you may just have a heartbeat back. All of this is included in what's testing, and of course, this is pub/sub-based communications. We have offline engineering. So in FX, we've defined a descriptor. What is a descriptor? Descriptor is an AML file. It provides an overview of the product, including the functionality that it has. It can include a whole lot more than just the base pieces require. You can have documentation, other things in the AML files. These AML files are exchanged between vendors. They're used by engineering tools to check and create configurations. So this is how you generate your initial configuration for connection managers and how you set up all the communications that you're going to use. Currently, we'll have testing for the AML files. Sometime in the future, we'll do testing for engineering tools yet too. So what do we test for an FX product? We test the basic functionality that's mandated in the profile. So this requires number of 105 profiles. It's the normal nano profile, normal set of embedded features. So this creation of sessions and communication stacks. But in addition, we also look at GDS functionality. A controller is required to be able to communicate with the GDS to do certificate management. This is kind of important. Otherwise, your controllers will have a lot of work in a plant. We also test auditing because controllers are required to be able to generate audit events. We check security as in roles. This is beyond just standard establishment of communications. Part of the other profiles that are included is the standard subscription profile. So we test how you subscribe to things. And then, of course, pub/sub is the nature of communication. So there's a fairly large set of testing for pub/sub communications. The controller requires the fixed profile communications, but these are all sort of basic UA functionality that is tested as far as testing your FX UAFX product. So what do we do? That's very specific to FX. We have a CTT test scripts, so they're automated tests in the test tool that you can download. They include testing all of the automation component, functional entities, and assets. And oh, by the way, the current release of the CTT already has testing for much of the automation component, functional entities, and assets available. We also validate the claims that you may state. So there's a bunch of capabilities that are described by the FX specs. So we validate those component capabilities. We have to do this sort of testing, we actually need it a little bit more in the system. So we have to have a sort of address space built into the CTT. So the CTT has gotten a little more complex because we need to be able to look at the server or the controllers being tested and do some of this testing dynamically. So, not every controller has the same functional entities listed in it or the same assets. So we check what's there. We check and validate the communications pieces. So we check the established connections behavior. This is the automated pieces that the connection manager issues commands to set up communication. Again, this requires a communication channel to actually be set up. So there is some required behavior in the CTT for it too. This is mostly available already, but it's not complete. So we have some initial automated testing for this. The goal when we're all done is that 80 to 90% of the testing for an FX product is automated. We're hoping to have, a highly automated test process. We have connection manager. We have information model testing for the connection manager. We are still working on test case definition for some of these. Partially is that the FX piece is missing some diagnostics. So in a future release of FX, FX controller will improve the diagnostics which will help us be able to test some of the connection manager pieces a little better. But for now, the information model pieces, so we have testing for, and we're working on defining the test cases for the client aspects of testing. So a connection manager acts like a client. It calls the other side. It sets up connections. So this part, we're goal is to automate the client testing, and that we'll be able to have testing of a product in its entirety. So all aspects of the controller. We're going to have some fairly large configurations in the CTT to handle this. It's going to require some updates to the CTT yet, so that we have an FX server effectively available in the CTT for testing communications. It's not a general purpose FX piece. It's just what's needed for running the communications tests. We're still working on test cases for this, so this is not complete, but it is in progress. So the CTT has a new set of testing tool that we've added to it. Came out in the release that we just published last week that includes AML testing. So we can do testing of the offline descriptors. So you point the test tool at a descriptor. The test scripts are still managed and run by the CTT. There isn't a lot of test scripts defined yet, but the tool is available for processing AML files, and it will be further enhanced as we go. What we currently provide for it is we can run sort of base AML validation. We can test these AML files are open packaging convention files, so we test the open packaging convention pieces. We can also do some level of security testing, so descriptors are signed, they have limits, signatures basically, and we can check the signature pieces of the files. We're still working on a whole lot of other test cases for the actual content of the file. Part of what's mandated by UAFX is that the AML descriptors have to also match, of course, what's in the product. So the testing isn't just that there's AML content in the descriptor, but that it matches up to the product. And oh, by the way, the first parts of these tests are all very generic. So if you have some other or group's AML file, we can also test those. They're just going to be testing for the base parts unless that other group defines additional test cases for AML content. So let's go on a little bit more. We have all of the test specifications, and all of the testing that we're working on is available through the OPC Foundation's profile reporting tool. So you can select the UAFX project and then look at the test suites available to it. So of course, this is also where, of course, you can look at the OPC UAFX profiles themselves and figure out what profiles you want to support. But in general, the product is there. And so where are we with all of this? We've been working a lot. We're targeting the fact that we should have controller profile certification testing available sometime in the October timeframe. So that's our target. It may be a little aggressive still, but it's at this point it's still doable. We're trying to make sure that we have testing available. October timeframe, we may not have as much of it automated as we want, but we should be able to certify a product sometime or test a product sometime in the October timeframe. Once your product if your product actually gets certified, you'll end up on the products on the marketplace, which is where, in general, all certified products go. So if you want to see what certified, go look at the Foundation's website. So, and that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for everything. If you have any questions, we'll be around for question and answer sessions.